One of the biggest challenges that I've seen kind of happen today is trying to figure out how can I make my developers effective? How can I help them achieve high velocity? But at the same time, give them the freedom to build and create, but also as a business, how do I make sure that they stay within, what the business needs?
Welcome to the Agile Digital Transformation Podcast, where we explore different aspects of digital transformation and digital experience with your host, Tim Butera, Content and Community Manager at AgileDrop.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm joined today by Ramiro Berrelleza, CEO and co-founder of Okteto, the leading platform for development experience automation. In today's episode, we'll be talking about redefining the developer experience, and we'll be covering both culture and technology with a particular focus, obviously, on the impact of new and emerging AI tools, as well as concluding with a few case studies of Okteto's clients that Ramiro will share with us. So, Ramiro, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here with us today. It's great having you. Do you want to add anything before we begin?
Hi, Tim. How are you? Nice being on your podcast. Thank you for having me. No, I think you covered it super well. Excited to dive deep into these topics.
Yep, same here. I think it's a topic that will resonate both with the more technical and more kind of technology-oriented listeners, as well as with the strictly business listeners, because obviously software development and web development is something that has become more and more important as kind of advanced digital experiences become the norm rather than just something that's kind of desirable. And I'm also excited to get into everything with you today, Ramiro. So my first question that I kind of started answering already, I guess, is why is there such a strong need to revisit or redefine the developer experience, not just focus on it?
I think you cover a lot of it, but I want to extend on that because it's been very interesting to see how over the past, I would say 20, 15 years, year after year, we're seeing this acceleration of software becoming more and more important for businesses, not only internally to help us operate businesses, but also as one of the major differentiating factors for companies. Nowadays, you see banks, healthcare, large enterprises investing a lot on like software-driven experiences, starting from websites, apps, systems for their suppliers. So as software becomes more important, I think all these decision makers are realizing that, hey, we have to be good at this. We have to be good at software to be able to, beat everybody else. And I think that is pushing this need for like, hey, okay, how do we get better at it? It started with digital transformation, moving to the cloud, streamlining operations, automating as much as possible. And once production was kind of like a more of an understood situation, by no means solved, but at least understood, what I've seen is that now companies are looking at the next step, which is, hey, developers, what can we do to make them more effective? In the past, it was, hey, developer, here's a laptop, like a super expensive Mac, super powerful, and then you figure it out from there. But, as organizations mature, we've learned that that's not enough, that setting up, common practices, that setting up standards, making processes more repeatable, giving developers the space to make decisions, but also kind of like give them some of them pre-made so they don't have to like choose every single thing by themselves. I think all that is driving this motion of the experience. And for me, it's very exciting because it definitely means that finally, like companies are realizing that, hey, we need to like give developers good tools to do their job, which it's already happening for every other discipline. It was missing for developers.
And it's also not just companies, but a lot of new like developer frameworks, especially like front-end UI frameworks, are kind of using this improved developer experience as their unique selling proposition, almost in a way. I'm thinking here about frameworks like Vue for the front end, or like in the web development sphere, Laravel, which basically is based on PHP. But people that dislike PHP love Laravel, and then it kind of they start to rethink their whole approach to PHP, and it's just a lot of this DX focused innovation in all across the board, basically.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's something that I've been in this industry for a while now, and in the old days it was still kind of like almost to a certain degree a point of pride that hey, like you have to learn these things, and they're hard on purpose because they're not meant for like everybody. It was almost like a secret code. But I'm very excited to see this change in all fronts. Like, and you're right, more and more products and frameworks and tools now start with DX experience as a core principle. For me, Docker was a huge kind of like proponent of this. I remember when I started using Docker, it was like, wow, the first time I felt like, oh, this is a tool for like kind of DevOps, dev, they're kind of on the border. But it was very clear, hey, this is really cool. They really thought about how to make it easy, how to make it obvious, how to lower the bar, and how to make me more effective. And it's really cool to see more and more tools to the point that I believe that now, like anybody building developer tools, if they don't think about developer experience, they're not gonna be successful. Like we can't go back to like the super hard like tools to use. I think nowadays that's something you have to think of first, and then build your own product on top of this experience that you want to provide.
And we'll talk a little bit more about tools in just a little bit. But first, I want to take a step back and just maybe adopt more the business perspective and talk a little bit about the main challenges today that businesses face in building strong development teams in the current economic and business climate.
Yeah, that's a topic that you can imagine as a CEO of a company that builds tools for developer experience automation and productivity. That is a topic that we talk a lot with decision makers internally. It's challenging. I mean, it's always been challenging to build good dev teams because it's a challenging job. We do things that are complex. But in terms of kind of like what we've been discussing, one of the biggest challenges that I've seen kind of happen today is trying to figure out how can I make my developers effective? How can I help them achieve high velocity? But at the same time, give them the freedom to build and create, but also as a business, how do I make sure that they stay within, what the business needs? For example, one of the challenges I've seen in the past is when you have multiple developer teams, and then every team is trying to solve the same problems in isolation. How do we deploy to production? How do we get data from a database to the next database? How do we design APIs? What I've seen lately is like this whole emergence of what now it's called platform engineering, which is helping kind of like canalize these efforts so that you have one team who's focused on kind of solving these common problems. And then that way, the rest of the teams are free to focus on the problems that are unique to their team. For me, that's a challenge because when done well, you can see teams really gain speed by not having to carry, all these decisions with themselves. They're kind of operating from a common set of standards, sandboxes, governance, all those things. But if it's not done well, it's a balance. Like, so if it's not done well, you can see teams that are slowed down by these common things that don't quite work for them. And that's when you see teams kind of having to circumvent the rules, to invent their own thing, to kind of hack around the process. And that's very challenging because there's no recipe for this. And every team, every organization needs to like find that good medium point where you give everybody enough tools, you take enough decisions out of their plate for them to be effective, but without being too heavy-handed. It's a challenge, but it's something that the industry is right now discussing a lot, which is exciting because it's like definitely something that everybody wants to go faster. Everybody wants to ship value as quickly as possible. So we're all aligned on that goal. How we get there, that's when it gets more challenging, and it's interesting, and that's where tools, frameworks, practices are emerging to help us manage all of these things.
Well, and one of the most important set of tools that are emerging that we really need to talk about in this context is obviously the emergence of new AI tools, specifically generative AI tools, stuff like that. And these are already making a huge splash in the world of software development. So let's talk a little bit about this. So how are all these newly emerging AI tools impacting the job of developers and the future of developer experience. So obviously we're talking here about stuff like ChatGPT and GitHub's Copilot. I think there was a study by McKinsey done recently that also broke down a lot of really interesting insights related to this. So let's talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, that study by McKinsey was super interesting. When I read it the other day, it really kind of like caused a splash. And there's been like a lot of conversations about that. I think it was very aligned with what we're saying before around today. A lot of what AI does is around taking things outside of the developer's purview, stuff that they don't have to worry about. Right. For me, one of the biggest benefits of things like Copilot when I've used it is, hey, I'm now not spending time writing all this very repetitive code, all this scaffolding. You can operate at a higher level of explaining, hey, I want you to do this. I want you to give me a piece of code that does X, Y, Z. To me, that's very powerful because in the past, you have to like sit and think, and then you're writing a code, and you're doing more things. Like you have to write the code, you have to think about it, you have to think about the solution. Now with these tools and what we're seeing today, I believe is kind of just the beginning of a massive shift. I think we're going to start seeing all these tools where more and more of this non-differentiations are taken care of by AI. Like writing code to go retrieve things from a database, that's not what makes your business great. So if we can automate that, then you can move faster. It happened to me the other day that I was writing this code to kind of like go over our data warehouse and extract some data. And it was a mix of Python code and SQL queries. And I figured, hey, okay, let's just open Copilot. I was ChatGPT actually. Open ChatGPT, say, hey, ChatGPT, I'm trying to do this, XYZ, this is the scenario, kind of send some prompts. And then what I got back was like this very refined queries and some code examples, which it wasn't exactly what I needed, but it got me 85% there. So instead of having to start from zero and think and try to figure out how do I do all these queries, try to remember the syntax for some of the things I was trying to do, I started at 85, which means that now I can go a lot farther with the same amount of resources than what I could do before. And for me, that is the beauty of AI. I think to answer your other question, the impact on the DevX is going to happen when we no longer see AI. I think that's something that kind of like the thought sphere are talking about. This is how today it's very visible, it's hot, it's new. We see kind of like everybody talking about AI. For me, that the interesting shift for the experience is when you don't realize, when you just, it's there, it's a tool. You don't have to opt in all this special AI model. No, you're writing code and you're gonna get suggestions. You're gonna see a bug and you're gonna get like a right there. You're gonna be able to like get a prompt and kind of figure out where the bug is and solve it. I think there's a lot of like very interesting possibilities there. And I believe they're all very aligned, just the same as the DevX movement around reducing developers' toil, reducing cognitive load, making it easier for developers to focus on solving the problems that are unique to their business and not solving over and over again this kind of common set of problems, like how do I query for this data, or how do I write a REST API on Python. Those things are done. We don't have to spend so much time on them, while we could be spending time on pushing the whatever the frontier of tech is for your industry. That's what I would like to spend my time, and that's what AI I believe is going to enable us to do.
The example that you gave of how you are using it reflects almost exactly a conversation that I had with one of our developers, who said that the main benefit that he sees from his own use of generative AI while coding is that it's much easier to achieve and to enter this flow state, because you don't have to lose time and energy. And the biggest chunk of energy that you would otherwise be able to give into like innovating and ideating, you would then need to invest like, I don't know, 50 or 60% of it into just getting started. Just starting at 85%, as you said before, is then something completely different, and it just allows you to just instantly enter this state of of dedicated, committed work and ideation.
Yeah, staying in that flow it's a great way of putting it, because that's what every tool that I use, every platform, all the AI tools, I use them for that. Like the longer I stay in flow, or any developer, or anybody who's creating something new, the more productive you become. And I think it's nice tie up to your other question around productivity. And yeah, it's all about this. Like everything that, whether it comes from the developer, from the team, from leadership, anything you can do to kind of like remove the friction, to let developers stay in flow the longest possible, helps a lot in creating this kind of high performing engineering organizations.
So maybe one thing that we could also talk a little bit about here is how too many meetings can negatively impact the developer experience. And I'm guessing if flow state is so important for developers, then redefining the developer experience would also necessitate a revisit of how we approach meetings and how developers are involved in meetings and how what the real ROI and the really important thing here is it that somebody attends all meetings, or is it that their flow state isn't interrupted? So what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, that's one of the never-ending debates in software. I know there's this essay by Paul Graham, one of the founders of YC, talks about the maker schedule versus the manager schedule, and touches on this. It's a full essay on why developers should be, how you should build things and experience how developers spend a lot of time in the flow. And he talks about, because it just takes a long time to get there. And if you're interrupted because you have to go to a meeting or take, and it's interesting because it's always a challenge, because meetings, they have a place in business. There's you need that touch point to make sure that, hey, are we all working on the same things? Are we synchronized on this situation? It's a challenge that we have at our company, where we're always trying to balance the interruptions versus the needs of communication versus the needs of the business. You're working on something, but suddenly there's an incident and somebody needs to take care of, like, why is the service no longer responding, or there's like a high priority bug. So it's a challenge. Like, that's something that I do believe that giving developers kind of make sure they have these blocks of uninterrupted work is very important. I think that's becoming even more challenging now with companies going remote, because of things like Slack, Discord. They make it harder to kind of get that. But it is very important. It is very important from the company building dev experience to have clear, hey, these are the meetings I want you to attend. I'm a big fan of async communication. Like, hey, put things in writing. I use Loom a lot to communicate things through video, and then just kind of like share the links. It's tough, but I do believe that moving to an async model of communication, which is what open source has been using for a long time, is a good step towards building a dev experience where developers can have this larger blocks of time uninterrupted. It's something that every manager, myself included, struggles with, because you have this need for information. But as we all build this new way of work, I'm again, same with AI, very optimistic that as we build these new ways of work, we will make this more effective. As we move to async communication, the need for meetings starts to get lower and lower, which, some meetings are not useful, others are fantastic. So knowing which ones to optimize helps, but we'll get there. But it's definitely something that what I tell the team and what I tell everybody is, one thing that's very important is for developers to manage their time as well. And hey, if you need to shut down Slack, do it. If you need anything to kind of get into the flow, as long as it's done with proper communication, I believe it's a great step towards building this dev experience that has its flow and less interruptions.
Yeah, I think some awesome points, especially here at the end, about like knowing how to balance, knowing which types of meeting to optimize, being able to kind of discern which types of meetings are actually valuable and actually demand everybody attend them, and which meetings could have just been, so to speak, emails or like notes in a Google Doc or something.
Yeah.
And another thing that I wanted to ask you about are ephemeral development environments. So what are ephemeral development environments, and how do dev teams need to adapt if they want to like fully leverage them?
Yeah, ephemeral environments, it's a topic, it's a passion of mine. My company does that, and it's something that I've been working on for a very long time. And it kind of comes from the same need of flow. To kind of give you some context, the idea of ephemeral environments came from, we all have done this, right? We're like, as a developer, and you said about something of this earlier, right? You're spending a lot of time just getting ready to work. In the specific case of ephemeral environments, we're trying to attack like all the time the developers are spending trying to set up all the infra they need to work, databases, microservices, code. We call this developer experience automation, is everything that a developer needs to kind of get ready to work. Everywhere I've worked at before, anything from like big tech to small startups has had this problem where like it's a lot of work. You have to set this up, you have to figure it out. When somebody new joins your team, somebody has to spend like days explaining them, well, you use this VM or you run these containers, and then you go to this service and you get these credentials. So the idea with ephemeral environments is, what if the same way we automated production, what if we were to automate all of this developer experience? Create a YAML where you define what this experience looks like, which services you need, which accounts, where you want to get data from, and then give you a single command, kind of like to just spin that up for you. That way you don't have to think about it. You don't have to wait for it. It's just there. And it's called ephemeral because the idea was, rather than having, this handcrafted environment on your laptop, spin this environment up, work on it. And when you're done, whether it's for the day, for the feature, or whatever, destroy it, and then you just launch another one. And for me, it's aligned with everything else we've said today, which is developer experience is all about getting you to the flow. And you don't get to the flow by, like trying to figure out which version of Postgres I'm supposed to run, or, hey, I have Node 16, but I need Node 18. How do I install it? The flow is by saying, hey, I want to work on this really cool API I'm designing, and you want everything else taken care of for you. And that is the principle of ephemeral environments. It's very exciting to me. It's always something I've always wanted to work on. I've built different iterations of this in the past using other technologies, but this new world where you have AI, you have serverless, Kubernetes, infra is now like so easy to spin up. It's really exciting to see a lot of what I was imagining over the years just happen. And really, it's all about making developers more effective. In our case, by having them not to worry about like this setup and just, hey, get started, build features, and then ship them as fast as possible.
Can you maybe share an example or two of how specifically you've helped your clients optimize their DX through your tool?
Yeah, no, of course. Let me think of a kind of like a good example. So one of our customers, LaunchDarkly, is the leader of like feature flags. It's a SaaS product that's broadly used across the world. And one of the challenges they had is that in order for a developer, when they join their company, in order for a developer to work, they have to run this very heavy Docker Compose file. And it was just like a lot of, we all can empathize with this. A lot of services, databases, different data stores, all that stuff. And one of the concerns was that, hey, I want to make sure that when somebody joins, they're like very successful startup, they're growing a lot. They were like, hey, when I want a developer to join my company, I want them to be able to, ship the first week. I don't want to have to wait a month for them to ship something because they're waiting for things to be ready. I want them to feel confident and ship fast. And as they were looking for solutions, they came to ours, and then we talked with them, and then we partnered with them. And that's now what they do is they have our product Okteto configured to use with their own stuff, which means that now anybody at that company can log in, click one button, and they have a full environment with like their entire product running, all their dependencies, data, services, other accounts, so that they can then focus on building the next big feature and then push that first week, which for them was very important, because for them, going back to the topic of effectiveness, having a developer ship to production fast was a key metric of how efficient and how good the organization is. And that's something we've seen across the board, like super interesting. Like we have customers in like many different verticals, enterprises, high growth startups, SaaS, small businesses, a bit of everything, right? And they have developers everywhere, even like government entities. And all of them constantly say how, hey, by not having to worry about this, by putting this out of my head, I gain time, I feel more confident because now I have this environment I can use where I can run my tests faster, where I can like validate that things work end to end. It's all fully automated, so I know it's going to look just like production. And that way they feel more confident. That way they can innovate faster. And as we've been saying, they can ship code faster and ship value faster for their own customers.
I picture it almost as a kind of Swiss Army knife, but for developer experience.
It is. Once you see this, when I get a chance to see how our customers fully implement our solution, it is really cool what you see. Like yeah, that idea of like one click, everything is there. And then the other thing we do is because everything is running on the cloud, not on your laptop. Your laptop is no longer like running out of CPU, running out of memory. Your battery lasts longer. You're not having to wait for like Alt tab, and then you have to wait because it's Slack and VS Code and your debugger are fighting for resources. As you move more and more things to the cloud, as you automate more of this, is less and less things to carry on your laptop and on your head, which to me is the idea of like the cognitive load that developers have to carry or deal with when they're developing. Anything we can do to reduce that makes them like substantially more happier and more performant.
But wait, so you're saying that this also means that they're no longer able to have the excuse of it works on my machine?
That is my end goal with this. It's removing that from our lexicon. Not because it's an excuse, but because honestly, for me, I don't know, maybe for everybody else, but for me in my career, it's always been a source of frustration because it's like, it works in a machine. Why it's not working in production? And production is always this black box. You have no idea what's going on there. There's no other thing like it. So then you end up having to engage in this super frustrating cycles of like, okay, it's broken production. Let me add some logs, do it again. Let me add some more logs, do it again. And then sometimes it works and you have no idea why it works now. And no one likes to ship buggy code. Developers suffer a lot by shipping buggy code. Companies suffer a lot. There's all this research on how much time. Like one of our customers actually did some analysis, and they discovered that for them, every production issue added something like 5 days of unplanned work, because you have to like undo it, iterate, test it again, do it again, plus all the work you postpone. So if we can get rid of that, like that's my dream, right? It's like get rid of the works in my machine, make sure your environment and production are as close as it's feasible to reduce this. And to me, that's one of the big bets of ephemeral environments, is by giving you something that's very close to production, you're going to have less of these issues. So you're going to have less cognitive load because you're no longer having to provision all this by hand, but also you're going to have less bugs because when you're writing your code, it looks more like the real thing. And then the jump from like dev environment to production, eventually we're going to get it to like be zero, but right now it's a small jump, but it's smaller than before. And I believe that's already giving, I've seen it with our customers. It's already giving them a lot of like benefits. And just the it's funny how just the trust, like when you're a developer and you're like feeling empowered and you don't have to feel like, oh, will this break it or not? Just that like kind of developing a level of trust makes you go way faster.
Well, Ramiro, thanks so much for the great conversation, the great insights. Just before we wrap it up, if listeners would like to learn more about you or connect with you or learn more about Okteto, where would you point them to?
Yeah, if any of this resonates with you, if you want to talk about developer experience, about your challenges, if you want to get a sense of what we're doing, please reach out to podcast@okteto.com. That's podcast@okteto.com. And, happy to talk. Like, I love talking the experience all day. I love learning of how other teams, individuals are facing these challenges. So please reach out. And also, I'm fairly active on Twitter. If you search for my name on Twitter, or X now, I guess, it will pop up. That's also a good place for us to connect and talk more about, all these challenges in our industry and what can we all do to make all of us faster with less friction, and happier. Happier developers are effective developers.
Awesome. Perfect note to finish on, Ramiro. And thanks again. It was great having you with us today.
Thank you very much, Tim. Enjoy the conversation.
And well, to our listeners, that's all for this episode. Have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to check out our other episodes, you can find all of them at agiledrop.com/podcast, as well as on all the most popular podcasting platforms. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes, and don't forget to share the podcast with your friends and colleagues.